So I see a lot of women who are on top of their diets of their husbands and their children and their in-laws, and they've prepped for the day for them, but they just eat whatever's there. They've not taken time out to think about what they need to eat for themselves. And I think that's 80% of my clientele, because they've done the work for everyone in the house, and then they've not given a thought to what their nutrition is. So I think the biggest barrier, so to say, is ourselves, that we need to stop and say, look, I need to look after my own health, and everything else will fall in place. Because if you are healthy, you will be able to do much more.
Back to NRI Woman podcast, where we dive deep into the experiences and stories of women from all walks of life. I'm Nanora, and alongside me is my co-host Bettina. Today we have the pleasure of welcoming a passionate advocate for women's health and wellness, Carlyne Remedios, founder of Nutritionally Yours. And today we're going to discuss a very important topic, menopause, and how nutrition can help us better manage this journey. Carlyne, can you please start by explaining what menopause is and why it's an important topic when it comes to nutrition and health?
Absolutely. So, the first things first is to understand that menopause is a natural biological process. It happens to all women. It basically marks the end of a woman's reproductive years, in simple words. So, what happens is that when you don't have a menstrual cycle for 12 consecutive months, that's when you've reached menopause. What essentially happens is that your hormones, namely estrogen and progesterone, start declining. And these hormones, as we all know, are responsible for reproductive health, for fertility, for pregnancy. So these hormones start decreasing, and that is the onset of menopause.
Got it.
I know there are so many symptoms, right? But what are the most common ones, or what are the things that people need to start looking out for?
Absolutely. So the symptoms will really differ from person to person. Some people breeze through menopause and never had a symptom before, and those are the lucky ones. And there are some of them who have some symptoms worse than the others. But the most common ones are your hot flashes, mood swings, night sweats, difficulty sleeping at night. Weight gain is one of the biggest ones I probably get to hear a lot about. Then, of course, you have things like, changes in mood, loss in concentration, sometimes even, forgetting simple things. So these all together are the symptoms of menopause. But it's important to remember that you might not experience all of them. You might experience a few of them, and you might experience some of them in more severity than others. But overall, this is what we're looking at. Also, you have symptoms like lack in libido, vaginal dryness. These, again, are symptoms that women will notice during their menopausal years.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask you. I mean, these are the common ones. What are some? Do you know of any uncommon ones that are not typically experienced by many people?
But I think a lot, everyone experiences some symptom or the other, but I think a lot of them don't talk about it. So especially things like lack in sexual health, or things like vaginal dryness. It's just because the way we've conditioned as women, we don't talk about it as much. So you probably are suffering from it, but you don't know how to talk about it, or you don't want to talk about it. But these are the symptoms that most menopausal women will experience and some during the years of a menopause. You might not experience all the symptoms at one time. You might experience them over the years that you go through menopause.
Yeah, and you're probably right. I mean, one may be that they don't want to talk about it. The other may be also that they don't even realize that it is happening because of menopause. I mean,
Absolutely.
we're just so used to chalking it up to age, chalking it up to all kinds of different things. And, like Nino and I can vouch for it. I mean, at least for us, the symptoms when they started. For me, one of the things was I am actually put off like caffeine and alcohol. I'm not able to drink any of those as much as I used to before. And I couldn't understand why that happened literally overnight.
Right.
And it was only when I looked it up, it was and it's a pretty common symptom.
Right.
that comes to others. So, how important is nutrition in managing these symptoms and menopause?
No, absolutely. I think nutrition is all about the food that you eat, and food is essentially what all of us need, right? So there's a strong correlation, and not only during menopause, but during all of the different stages of life of that women go through. And menopause is one of those sort of milestone stages that we go through. And most of the symptoms that we spoke about, they may not be reversed with nutrition, but they definitely can be managed, and we can reduce the severity of it if we know what's triggering them off. So, for example, things like hot flashes, right? So, like you said, caffeine and alcohol are the biggest triggers for hot flashes. So, if we can reduce our intake of that, we probably will reduce the frequency and the severity of it. So, even like sort of concentrating more on cooler beverages will sort of help us manage those hot flashes better. Even simple things like exercising in a cooler temperature. When we are exercising, we are generating heat in our bodies, and that's going to trigger off the hot flashes even worse. So, exercising in cooler temperatures. So, simple things like that will make a difference. When you're talking about things like even difficulty sleeping at night, this is something that sometimes we attribute to age as well, because it sort of does come with age. But things that foods that have tryptophan, for example, things like your dairy products, things like nuts and seeds, bananas, these have a nutrient called tryptophan that have calming effects on the body. So consuming them closer to bedtime will help. Avoiding caffeine at least the second half of the day can help your sleeping a little better. And the other thing is to practice something what we call a sleep hygiene, which typically means that you're setting a time to sleep and wake up every day. So your body is getting used to that consistency, setting up an atmosphere where you're comfortable so that you're able to sleep, whether it's playing calming music, whether it's having essential oils like lavender next to your bedside, whether it's having a cup of chamomile or lavender tea, whatever it is, but set a bedtime routine so that your body is used to that timing of sleeping and waking up. The other sort of symptoms we spoke about is, say, lack of or decline in reproductive, in sexual health. So, a nutrient, zinc, for example, helps in, sexual activity. So, zinc can be got in your nuts, in your seeds, in oysters, in seafood. So, including those foods in your diet will help. The other things we spoke about were vaginal dryness, hydration here is the biggest thing. So not only for dryness, but dryness of skin, for hair, so hydration, not only drinking water, but even consuming fruits and vegetables that have high water content. So things like your cucumbers and your melons, your leafy greens, these are high water content fruits and veggies that will add on to your overall, hydration status. What else did we talk about in terms of symptoms? So, mood, concentration. These are things that, happens to a lot of us during the day and we don't know what's happening, but including things like that are rich in omega-3 fatty acids. So things like your fatty fish, like your salmon and mackerel, flax seeds, chia seeds. These are omega-3 rich foods, and they will help in mood and concentration. And they also will help, sort of getting your daily dose of sunlight, like the sunshine vitamin, which is vitamin D. A lack of that actually shows that it can aggravate, depressed mood and anxiety. So, getting your dose of vitamin D every day. Foods like egg yolks, like sun exposed mushrooms, these are all sources of vitamin D as well. So, I mean, there's a huge sort of link between how we can manage our menopausal symptoms and diet. And it's just about being aware. And like you said, most of us don't know what's happening, so we don't know what we should be doing. But these are a few things that we can start putting into practice for sure.
You've mentioned diet that we incorporate in, like, foods to eat. What are the foods that you shouldn't be eating at this stage?
Absolutely. Yeah. And the foods that we shouldn't be eating is not going to be a surprise. I mean, it's something that
I'm
we
sure.
ideally shouldn't be eating, whether we are, going through menopause or not. But the biggest one is your ultra processed foods and your saturated fats. The reason being is that as we enter menopause, because your estrogen hormone is and progesterone are declining, women are more prone to cardiovascular disease. So you're more prone to heart disease. And that is why things like saturated fat, which is basically what we classify as bad fat, is something that we should be sort of avoiding as much as possible. So when we talk about saturated fats, we're talking about deep fried foods. So anything that is fried or deep fried, your ultra processed foods, which is typically foods that come in a packet. So things like your chips and your snacks, those are ultra processed foods. Trans fats again are most of your fats that come in your bakery products. So whether it's cakes and pastries and biscuits and cookies. So these are what we call as saturated fats. Also fats from animal sources. So, the fat on your meats, the skin on your chicken, the cream on top of your milk. These are animal sources of fat. And these are saturated fats. So that's something we definitely want to keep to the absolute minimal. And the other thing, like I said, ultra processed foods would come under this category, and added sugars, which again, like we know, that with menopause, you are also going to have some degree of weight gain. And most women will put on weight around the abdomen area. And about 15 to 20% of the weight that women put on during menopause is around the abdomen area. So you are going to have that belly fat. So we want to make sure we're cutting down the added sugars as well, which is your table sugar, your jaggery, and all the other sugars that are apparently healthy but are sugars, like your coconut sugar and your jaggery. These are all sugars, just given different names. So we want to make sure that our added sugars are down to the absolute minimal as well. Natural sugars that you get from eating whole fruits are absolutely fine, but added sugars is something that we want to keep to the absolute minimal.
So, is it actually a myth that women tend to gain weight during menopause, or is it in people? Is it in women's head? Because you see some of them who don't really gain a lot of weight are really able to manage menopause quite well. There's a bit of fluctuation, and then there are some who just feel like maybe it's bloating, or just do everything under the sun and are not able to shift the weight on the scale. So is there like a strong correlation between weight gain and menopause? And if there is, how does one manage that in a healthy way?
So unfortunately, there is a strong relationship between menopause and weight gain. Like I said, that most of the weight that you gain post menopause is around the abdominal area, and that's because of the decline of the hormones estrogen and progesterone. Some put on more weight than others. Some are able to manage it better than others. But the fact of the matter is that you are not the same weight you were when you were 20, when you are in your 40s or 50s. And this is something I hear from a lot of women. They're like, oh, I was, 45 or 50 kilos when I was in college, and now I'm so. But the thing is that you are going to gain weight as you grow older, and that's just the way it is. So menopause is one because of the fluctuation of your hormones, and also as you age, you tend to lose muscle mass as well. And muscle is active tissue, which basically helps improve your metabolism. And increased metabolism helps with weight loss. So the trick is to be able to focus not on weight loss as much as on gaining muscle, because the more muscle you build, the more active tissue you have, and that's when your body is going to have a higher metabolism to be able for you to lose that extra weight that you want to get rid of. But in saying that, I'm always cautious about talking about weight, because I think we're so obsessed with weight and the numbers on the scale that we forget that we should be focusing on health and fitness and nutrition, and the weight loss will be a happy side effect. What happens is that when we know that we're going to put on weight during menopause, and I've seen this a lot in my practice, that a lot of women then just start restricting themselves and they stop eating chunks of, food groups, which in the bargain actually causes more detrimental effects to their health, because, then they are that restrictive eating which causes them to have more sort of mood swings and irritability and sugar fluctuations. Cutting out large chunks of any food group is going to deprive you of essential nutrients that you're getting from that food group. You are going to be eating overall less. So your overall protein intake is decreasing, which is good for muscle mass. A lot of people cut out dairy and gluten from their diet. Dairy gives you your essential, your calcium, your vitamin D, your gluten, unless of course you're severely allergic and you have a disease that prevents you from eating that, gives you a lot of your B vitamins and fiber. So in the bargain of losing weight, we end up causing a lot of nutritional deficiencies, which at this stage in our lives we should avoid, because we want to make sure that what we're eating is nutrient dense and not restricting ourselves further. So we focus on muscle mass, increasing muscle mass, and on health and nutrition. I think that's I think the best way and the safest way to go about this.
Yeah, you're right about the weight gain because, you know, for someone like me, as you all know, I lost my mom a long time ago. So I didn't have anyone to ask, like, hey, mom, what did you go through when you went through menopause? So as I started to gain the weight, I didn't know what I was doing wrong because, I've done treks, I exercised, I did everything. Like I've done marathons. So for me, when I started the weight gain, I just couldn't understand whether it was, I had no clue that whether it was menopause, whether it was just my body. I just thought, oh, my mom gained weight when she was 50, when she started aging. And oh, maybe that's what's happening to me. It must come from the Fernandez side of the family. You know what I mean? Like I chalked it up to that. But little did I know, like I always say now, that had I known what I knew, like back then, like it would have made so much of difference. I would have changed my diet. I would have exercised a lot more. I would have, changed my lifestyle. So it's good to know. Like I'm happy to learn this. Like as I'm now going through the perimenopause stage, I'm not going crazy. You know what I mean? Like it's all making sense now,
Right.
and I hope that I continue. Like I've changed so much now. I've changed, the coffee, like Bettina, I don't crave coffee anymore. When I get up in the morning, I start with a glass of warm water.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I'm beginning to see, the little changes, so it's good to know what we should eat, what we shouldn't eat, what we, want to stay away from.
Absolutely. No, you're absolutely right, because a lot of the women that I speak to sort of say exactly what you're saying, that we didn't know. There was no
Yeah.
one that we could talk to. We had no idea what was going on. So they
Yeah.
appreciate that the information is more easily available now. And I
Yeah.
think also, hopefully our generation, everyone's obviously asking more questions, which is great, that we need to start advocating for ourselves. So when you go to talk to our doctors, we're going to talk to our gynecologists, we need to ask more questions and we need to advocate for ourselves. And that's the only way we'll get the answer. So I'm glad we're having this discussion, because I think this is that, one of the small things that we can do to bring this awareness out to so many women who will be entering the stage sooner or later.
Exactly.
So, Caroline, what are some of the questions? You rightly said that we need to bring up these conversations and have these conversations with our doctors and our gynecologists. So one part is having access to information. The other part is having access to so much of information that one is drowning in it and really doesn't know what to ask, because there's just so much. And I think sometimes we absorb certain things and feel like, oh, even if it's not happening, maybe this is happening to me. This is happening to me. So firstly, to be able to diagnose that, yes, okay, I am in the perimenopausal stage, and we understand that you're not a doctor, but from a perspective who has the knowledge, what are the questions that we can ask our gynec, and do you know if there are any tests that can be done to actually say that, yes, you are in the perimenopausal stage?
Right. So number one, the thing that you rightly said, Bettina, is that speak to qualified healthcare professionals. So, TikTok and Instagram and WhatsApp forwards are not sources of information. And I have to say that because a lot of people actually assume that any forward is, gospel truth. So that is one thing, that get your information from either your gynec, from qualified healthcare professionals. If you are sort of in that stage where you're not sure whether you're, entering this phase of your life or not, yes, obviously you go to your gynec. There are certain tests, so they will do an estrogen test. They will do a whole host of hormonal tests to know what your levels are. Obviously, you would have stopped menstruating for about 1 year, so you know that you're in your menopausal stage. In addition to asking for the hormonal test, you would also want to get your basic nutritional profile, things like your calcium levels done. You want to make sure that you get, if you have a history of fractures or brittle bones, or your maternal side have had a history of fractures or a hip surgery or an injury, it's worthwhile getting even a bone mineral density scan done, which is basically, it's a DEXA scan, DEXA, which is ideally basically scans to see what is your bone, how porous your bones are. So it'll tell you your sort of osteoporosis risk. Ideally, that is something that you can ask for. And you do that around the age of 60, 65. But if you're more prone to brittle bones, then you would do that a little earlier. And ideally, they would ask you to do it every 2 years to sort of see how you're progressing. So that sort of gives you a benchmark in terms of, how good or bad your bones are, and you start taking precaution accordingly. The other thing is to discuss your symptoms with your gynec. If you feel that you are not able to sleep at night, if you feel that you're irritable most of the day, discuss those symptoms to understand whether it's due to the menopause, is it due to other aspects of your life, but at least you get clarity and you're not just sort of brewing in your own, questions and trying to figure out what's sort of happening. I think what I see from, patients, and what I see from my own family members, a lot of people are intimidated when it comes to talking to their doctors for whatever reason. So I think a good way of approaching it is to write down your list of questions before your appointment. Write it down and just go question by question. And trust me, your healthcare professional, your doctor, I definitely appreciate it when I have patients who come with a list of questions, because you're having a more sort of intelligent conversation and you're getting your questions answered. I think that's a easier way to approach this, because a lot of people just get tongue tied in front of their doctor. So that's probably a good way of approaching it.
Particularly beneficial for women experiencing menopause-related symptoms?
Absolutely. So there are a few nutrients you definitely want to focus on. So number one is your calcium, because we spoke about how osteoporosis is, women at a higher risk of osteoporosis post menopause. So whether you're talking about dietary sources of calcium, so obviously we know that our milk and milk products, dairy, are all good sources of calcium, but you also have your vegan or your plant sources of calcium, which is your dark green leafy vegetables, your nuts like your almonds and walnuts. Even things like millet or ragi is actually a good source of calcium. So dietary sources, these are your sources of calcium. If you are struggling to meet your calcium requirements, when sometimes you do, then you look at taking a calcium supplement. Ideally, you require about 1,200 milligrams a day, but it's all good to understand that your calcium should be taken in doses of not more than 5 or 600 at a time, because that's when your body will be able to absorb it more efficiently. So if you're taking a calcium supplement, don't over supplement, because excess calcium is not good either, because you're at a risk of then developing kidney stones. So we don't want that. So if you're not, calcium and iron fight for the same place in the body. So for whatever reason you're taking an iron supplement, make sure that there's a gap of at least 2 hours between a calcium and an iron supplement. Some people do experience some sort of stomach upset when taking supplements. So if you're one of those people, then take your calcium supplement post a meal. Don't take it on an empty stomach. These are just simple sort of things to remember. You get different type of calcium salts. So you will get, if you look at your calcium supplement, you will get calcium carbonate, you get calcium citrate. So calcium citrate typically is better absorbed than calcium carbonate, but calcium carbonate is more freely available. So it's just worthwhile knowing that there are different salts. And ideally try and get a calcium supplement that has vitamin D along with it as well, because vitamin D and calcium together help with bone metabolism. I hope that was not too much information, but that's to do with calcium. Um, when then the other nutrient that we want to look at is your omega 3s as well. So your dietary sources of omega 3 are all your fatty fish. Your flax seeds are a great source. So the best way to consume flax seeds is roast it, grind it into a powder, keep it in a bottle, and just use it on your salads, on your soups, and just sprinkle it whenever you can. Chia seeds, your nuts and seeds, these are all good sources of omega-3 fatty acids. Vitamin D we spoke about. You can obviously take a vitamin D supplement. But if the other dietary sources of vitamin D are like your egg yolk, your dairy, and sun-exposed mushrooms. So when I say sun-exposed mushrooms, is that if you're getting mushrooms, make sure that you keep them on your windowsill, gills up for at least 10 or 15 minutes so that it absorbs the vitamin D, and you're getting more benefit of your vitamin D from the mushroom than just using the mushroom as is. Most of us who, even though we live in a tropical country, me in India and you in UAE or whatever, even though we are living in a tropical country, we don't. We most of us are vitamin D deficient because either we slap on a lot of sunscreen when we go out, which we should, or we're covered, or we're in a car into a building, so we're not really getting direct sunlight. So most of us, and especially Indians or women, people of Indian origin, we have a more darker colored skin, which again doesn't allow vitamin D to be absorbed as well. So it's worthwhile getting a vitamin D test done and then taking supplements accordingly, because it's difficult to get your vitamin D only via sunlight or via your dietary sources. So that's another important nutrient you want to sort of look at. Yeah, and so from a supplement nutrient wise, this is what we look at. And of course, then we spoke about phytoestrogens as well, which you can include, which come from all of your soy and soy-based products. And you also want to look at making sure you get your antioxidants. So, which will typically, it's easily gotten from all your deeply pigmented fruits and vegetables. So things like your dark green leafy vegetables, your berries, your beetroots, anything which is deeply pigmented will have your range of antioxidants. And the other nutrient that we don't focus on too much is fiber. Most of us are fiber deficient, and when we're talking about menopause and weight gain, fiber again plays a very important role. And the best way to get fiber is including whole grains, which is basically your whole wheat, your unpolished rice, your oats, and your whole pulses, and of course your fruits and vegetables. So these are the few nutrients we want to keep in mind, especially when we're talking from a menopause point of view.
Yeah. So, on the flip side of over restriction is where so many of us actually feel just really full all the time.
Yeah.
One's appetite goes down completely. So even if one truly is not consciously restricting themselves, they're just not able to eat. So how does one deal with that? That
Yeah.
loss of appetite or feeling full all the time
Absolutely.
without having eaten, like what one would consider a full meal.
Absolutely. And appetite fluctuation is again another sort of a symptom or another aspect of what you would feel when you're going through menopause. And the important thing is to remember that you might not have the same eating capacity that you had, years back. And it's no harm in eating small meals throughout the day. You might not have the appetite for the traditional breakfast, lunch, and dinner, which we're all sort of brought up with, right? You get up in the morning, you have a breakfast, you have lunch, you have dinner. And that might not be the case now because you might not feel the need to eat. So there's no harm in breaking down those meals. So eat when throughout the day will actually help in this loss of appetite or drop in appetite. And that also will help you. What happens when that's on the go, you're traveling, you're running around for work, keep a snack handy in your bag or in your car. Have a little snack pack of like a trail mix, keep some dates and nuts and seeds, so you have a trail mix with you. Or you have a fruit that's always available with you, or you have like a protein bar that's in your bag, so you have access to food when you do feel hungry, and you're not starving yourself until you reach home to then, just eat whatever is available to you.
Style, like how does it like, do you include factors like exercise, stress management? Like how do you help with that? How does it interact with the nutrition, and how does it support our overall health during menopause?
So I always say that when we're looking at health and wellness, these all these factors work hand in hand. You can be eating you can be eating a really good diet, but you're not exercising, or you're not doing any weight bearing exercises, or strengthening exercises, so you won't build that muscle. If you're not practicing deep breathing or yoga, taking a walk to sort of help you with your stress, what happens is that stress again affects your gut bacteria, which again will affect the absorption of nutrients. Stress also causes an increase in a cortisol hormone, which again is known to sort of cause belly fat. So, they all sort of are linked to each other. So, a diet, nutrition, and stress management have to work hand in hand. So, as long as you're eating healthy, make sure that you might not have the time to exercise 6 days of the week, but if you can consistently chalk out 3 or 4 times a week to do some form of physical activity, that's more doable than saying I'm going to exercise every day. So do what is convenient and what's going to be consistent for you. Whatever form of activity that helps you relax. So whether it's listening to music, going for a walk in the park, or going for a swim, or just doing yoga or deep breathing exercise, anything that helps you relax, include that at the start or at the end of the day. So you're sort of winding down, or you're starting your day off on a positive note. But all of these three work hand in hand. You can't really chalk out and say, oh, this is more important than the other. They all have their equal space in, even when we are talking about managing, menopause and menopausal symptoms.
Have women come to you with like challenges or barriers that they face when trying to adopt like a healthier eating habit? Like, is there anything during menopause, especially because all of us are trying to make a change, right?
Right.
And how do they overcome it? Like, have you had anyone come to you with those issues?
I think the biggest one at this, it's really funny, but the biggest one is that I feel that women don't give enough time to themselves. So I see a lot of women who are on top of their diets of their husbands and their children and their in-laws, and they've prepped for the day for them, but they just eat whatever's there. They've not taken time out to think about what they need to eat for themselves. And I think that's 80% of my clientele, because they've done the work for everyone in the house, and then they've not given a thought to what their nutrition is. So I think the biggest barrier, so to say, is ourselves, that we need to stop and say, look, I need to look after my own health, and everything else will fall in place. Because if you are healthy, you will be able to do much more. So I think that is the biggest thing. And that's something I see so often, because I have husbands and wives on programs with me, and the wife has taken control of the husband's entire nutrition plan and is not given a thought to her. So that is something that I see very, very often. The second thing I see is lack of information, like we spoke about, that women just don't know, or they don't know who to talk to. And the other thing is misinformation, where you're getting information from the wrong sort of sources. And the other biggest thing is body image. And I think that's a big one, because just the way society has conditioned us to think that slim and thin is good, and people living in bigger body sizes aren't. So that conditioning has taken over our mindsets, and that's when I find a lot of women, I've not said that clinically depressed, but that's sort of weighing on their minds most of the time. And their focus is getting up in the morning and weighing themselves. And that's the worst thing you can do to yourself, because you're not going to lose weight every day. You will have weight fluctuations. You would be constipated one day, you'll have bloating one day, you'll have water retention. So I think that we need to sort of move from the number on the scale and focus on non-weight gain. So I always, when we sit down and write down goals, I always ask my clients that, besides weight, what else do you want to achieve? Do you want to make sure that you can climb a flight of stairs without getting breathless? Do you want to make sure you have more energy to carry on your task? Do you want to make sure that you're eating more plants, you're drinking more water? So non-weight based goals is something that we should start looking at rather than just weight-based goals. And if we're able to sort of move that mindset, I think we'll all be in a much better space.
Thank you so much, Carlyne, for coming onto our show today and sharing such valuable information. We want to share with our listeners as well that if you are tuning in to us, that this is just a guide. Please visit, your health professional before you take on any of this advice. So it comes down to managing your diet, managing your mental health. Number one, number two, getting your tests done to identify what you have, what you need, and then finding the right source of supplements, nutrients, diet plan, nutrition plan, like you said, which is a better way to describe it, that works for you. Thank you, Carlyne, for joining
My
us today.
pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us. If you want to know more about Carlyne, please look her up in our show notes. You can find it at nriwoman.com. You can also follow us at nriwoman podcast on Instagram or other socials. We'll be back next week with more interesting women and interesting topics. Until then, keep learning, keep inspiring, and be kind.